Amongst notable Métis people are television actor Tom Jackson, Commissioner of the Northwest Territories Tony Whitford, and Louis Riel, who led two resistant movements: the Red River Rebellion of 1869 to 1870 and the Northwest Rebellion of 1885, which ended in his trial. The languages inherently Métis are either Métis French or a mixed language called Michif. Michiv, Mechiv, or Mechiv is a phonetic spelling of Metiv, a variant of Métis. The Métis today predominantly speak English, with French a strong second language, as well as numerous Aboriginal tongues. A 19th century community of the Métis people, the Anglo-Métis, were referred to as country-born. They were children of Rupert's land for trade, typically of Acadian, Scottish, or English paternal descent, and Aboriginal maternal descent. Their first languages would have been Aboriginal, Cree, Sauter, Assiniboine, and so on, and English. Their fathers spoke Gaelic, thus leading to the development of an English dialect referred to as Bongi. S35 of the Constitution Act 1982 mentions the Métis, yet there has been long debate over legally defining the term Métis. But on September 23, 2003, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that Métis are a distinct people with significant rights. Holy ruling. The Métis are people descending from marriages between Europeans, mainly French, and Cree, Ojibwe, Algonquin, Sauteurs, Menominee, Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and other First Nations. Their history dates to the mid-17th century. When Europeans first arrived to Canada, they relied on Aboriginal peoples for fur trading skills and survival. To ensure alliances, relationships between European fur traders and Aboriginal women were often consolidated through marriage. The Métis homeland consists of the Canadian provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Ontario, as well as the Northwest Territories. Warfare was common among Inuit groups with insufficient population density. Inuit, such as the Nunatamoites, Umamoites, who inhabited the Mackenzie River Delta area, often engaged in common warfare. The Central Arctic Inuit lacked the population density to engage in warfare. In the 13th century, the Thule culture began arriving in Greenland from what is now Canada. Norse accounts are scant. Norse-made items from Inuit campsites in Greenland were obtained by either trade or plunder. One account, Ivar Baradason, speaks of small people with whom the Norsemen fought. 14th century accounts that a Western settlement, one of the two Norse settlements, was taken over by the Skrellin. After the disappearance of the Norse colonies in Greenland, the Inuit had no contact with the Europeans for at least a century. By the mid-16th century, Basque fishers were already working the Labrador coast and had established whaling stations on land, such as being excavated at Red Bay. The Inuit appear not to have interfered with their operations, but they did raid the stations in winter for tools, and particularly worked iron, which they adapted to native needs. Inuit. The Inuit are the descendants of what anthropologists call the Thule culture, which emerged from western Alaska around 1000 CE and spread eastward across the Arctic, displacing the Dorset culture in Inuktitut, the Tunit. Inuits historically referred to the Tunit as giants or dwarfs, who were taller and stronger than the Inuits. Researchers hypnotized that the Dorset culture lacked dogs, larger weapons, and other technologies used by the expanding Inuit society. By 1300, the Inuit had settled in West Greenland and finally moved into East Greenland over the following century. The Inuit had trade routes with more southern cultures. Boundary disputes were common and led to aggressive actions. Inuk in a kayak, c. 1908 to 1914. Many Aboriginal civilizations established characteristics and hallmarks that included permanent urban settlements or cities. Agriculture, civic and monumental architecture, and complex societal hierarchies. These cultures had evolved and changed by the time of the first permanent European arrivals. See late 15th to early 16th centuries, and have been brought forward through archaeological investigations. There are indications of contact made before Christopher Columbus between the first peoples and those from other continents. Aboriginal people in Canada interacted with Europeans around 1000 CE, but prolonged contact came after Europeans established permanent settlements in the 17th and 18th centuries. European written accounts generally recorded friendliness of the First Nations, who profited in trade with the Europeans. Such trade generally strengthened the more organized political entities, such as the Iroquois Confederation. Throughout the 16th century, European fleets made almost annual visits to the eastern shores of Canada to cultivate the fishing opportunities. A sideline industry emerged in the unorganized traffic of furs overseen by the Indian Department. The woodland cultural period dates from about 2000 BCE to 1000 CE and has locales in Ontario, Quebec, and maritime regions. The introduction of pottery distinguishes the woodland culture from the earlier archaic stage inhabitants. Laurentio people of southern Ontario manufactured the oldest pottery excavated to date in Canada. They created pointed bottom beakers decorated by a cord marking technique that involved impressing tooth implements into wet clay. Woodland technology included items such as beaver incision knives, bangles, and chisels. The population practicing sedentary agricultural life ways continued to increase on a diet of squash, corn, and bean crops. The Hopewell tradition is an Aboriginal culture that flourished along American rivers from 300 BCE to 500 CE. At its greatest extent, the Hopewell exchange system networked cultures and societies with the peoples of the Canadian shores of Lake Ontario. Canadian expression of the Hopewellian peoples encompasses the Point Peninsula, Saugeen, and Laurel complexes. First